What's up everyone, welcome back to another FPL video. The Euros are fully kicking off, but we've got one eye on our FPL teams. Today we're going to have a look at 10 players that I think you guys should avoid in your Game Week 1 teams. Let's get into it. So welcome everyone. So as I said, today we're going to have a look at 10 overpriced players. There will be another video coming looking at 10 underpriced players, but we're going to focus on the overpriced players today. We're going to look across all positions, so goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders, strikers. Have you got in there? We've got players from all of the positions that I think are overpriced and you shouldn't really be having in your teams. And the reason they can be overpriced: position change, they're a bit of a rotation risk, they're a one-season wonder, or I just think they've been priced at more than they're worth and there are other players that you can get for less that are better spending on your money. So just a few ideas. We've got 10 here today that we're going to go through. Make sure to join the league code that is just below me for this season. As I said, there'll be prizes for you all, but let's get into the first player. The first one we've got up is Sadio Mane, who's come in as a 12 million midfielder. Now, Mane returned 5.5 points per start last season, which isn't a bad return, but the issue with him is his price in comparison to a lot of other players. So he's only $500,000 less than Salah. And then you've also got the likes of Jota coming in at 7.5 million, Trent in at 7.5, and Robertson in at 7, and Van Dijk in at 6.5. So it feels very expensive in comparison to those cheaper ones, and it's too close to the budget that you're going to be spending on Salah. The Mane versus Salah debate, with Salah on penalties, him being a bigger goal threat throughout the whole course of the season. Mane did end well, but you've got to be going with Salah out of the two of them, a more reliable captaincy option. He only really came good at the end of the season, as it says there. He didn't play particularly well. He got rotated a bit with Jota. So you're not going to be paying 12 million for Mane when Fernandes at Manchester United is the same price. De Bruyne is the same price. Son is 10 million. Then you've got the likes of Jota at 7.5, the Liverpool defenders in at 7.5, and Salah just $500,000 more. It's a lot of money to be spending on Mane when I think there are much better options for you to be spending your money on. The Liverpool fixtures, as you can see in the bottom left, are nice. They do have a really nice start. One of the nicest starts out of any teams, with Norwich, Burnley in the first 2, and then Leeds, Crystal Palace and Brentford all to play in the first 6. So there is a differential tactic that you could go with Salah and Mane and then Trent, for example, but that's a lot of money and very focused on one team. So I personally won't be owning Mane, and I think he's a player to avoid because he's been overpriced. If he was in at the likes of, I don't know, 11.5 this season, it would have made us think a little bit more about the Mane versus Salah debate. But at 12 million, he's a no-go for me. Next up, we have Phil Foden. Now, Phil Foden is a bit of a difficult one. He scored a lot of points per start last season, as you see there, 6.82 points per start. But my worry again is that he's just not going to play enough minutes for him to be a regular starter and a regular pick in our fantasy team. So as you can see there, 17 starts last season and 11 substitute appearances. So when he starts those 11, that's really great. He scores a lot of points, but it's those 11 substitute appearances where he comes on and gets, 1 or 2 points, which just outweighs the 17 starts that you're going to get from him. If we knew that Foden was going to start every single game, at that price, he'd be an absolutely brilliant asset to own. He did start to get more minutes. He did play a lot in the Champions League. So with that not taking place for the first few game weeks, it may be that he gets more minutes, but I want to see how City are lining up for the first few games. They do play away at Tottenham in the first game, so it's not necessarily we need to go on them straight away. But with the likes of Sterling, with the likes of Mahrez, they are looking apparently to buy Jack Grealish, with Ferran Torres playing really well as well. I just can't see Foden being a starter every week. He will still see that rotation, so 8 million for me is a bit too much to be playing when you could go for a 7.5 mil midfielder, a 6.5 like Rafinha or Harrison at Leeds that I think will produce similar output. The fixtures as well aren't that great. Of course, Man City can beat anyone, but Tottenham, Leicester, Chelsea away in the first 6 means, as I said, I think at the start of the season, there's players we can go for elsewhere until we know how many minutes Foden is likely to play. So Foden is the second one on my list. Next up, we have Jamie Vardy of Leicester, who's been priced in at 10.5 million as a forward and had quite a price increase from under 10 million up to 10.5 and is now the second most expensive forward in the game. Last season he had his patches. He returned 5.7 points per start, which is a pretty good return. He does get his goals, does get a lot of assists as well. Now with Iheanacho up there, he is on penalties, but it's the fact that, again, his price in comparison to a lot of other assets just make it not worthwhile for me. When you've got the likes of Watkins, Iheanacho, Calvert-Lewin all in around 7.5, 8, it just doesn't seem worthwhile paying an extra 3 million. And actually, towards the end of the season, Iheanacho was outperforming Vardy a lot more. So to pay 3 million more for Vardy over Iheanacho just doesn't make any sense to me at all. So you're much better off paying 7.5 Iheanacho, or even going for the likes of Maddison or Barnes in midfield for Leicester, than paying that 10.5. And he does seem to have a lot of injuries. You know, you often see him coming off the pitch late, not training that much, and then being ready for the next game. It seems to be how he plays. So I think there'll be rotation with him as he gets on, and Iheanacho will start to come to the forefront. There's talk of another striker coming in. The opening fixtures are quite nice. Wolves, Norwich, Brighton, Burnley early on. But yeah, as I said, if I'm going for a Leicester asset, it will be likely be Iheanacho or one of the midfielders and not Vardy. Next up, we have Stuart Dallas at 5.5 million. So Dallas has now been moved to a midfielder, so he won't be getting those clean sheet points. He will still be getting, you know, his goals and assists that he can get throughout the course of the season. As we saw last season, he was a great asset to own. But now he's been moved as a midfielder, sort of half the points that he scores has been taken away. He is also now very close in price to the likes of Raphinha and Harrison, who I think have been underpriced, and we can maybe talk about them in my video later this week. But the fact that you could pay $500,000 more and go up to the likes of Harrison or Raphinha or Buendia, for example, just doesn't make me think that he's an asset worth owning. And actually, with Alioski leaving and not being at Leeds next season, there's a chance that Dallas actually goes back into defence. So although he moved to a midfielder in FPL because he played there last season, he may be back as a left back. So if you need a cheap midfielder to go on your bench, just get a 4.51, or if you've got spare money, go up to the likes of Harrison or Raphinha if you want a Leeds player. The opening fixtures are fine. United away, they can create chances. We know Leeds can create chances in basically whatever fixture, so I don't think it really matters the fixtures that much. I am looking at some of those Leeds midfielders, but Dallas will not be the one that I'm owning, and I actually think he may be back at left back this season, which makes him a much less appealing player. Next up, we have Southampton's Che Adams, who is had an increase in price from 6 million up to 7 million remaining as a forward. So he scored only 4.2 points per start last season, which isn't as much as a lot of the other players on this list. He does start almost every game, unlike the others, which can be a bit rotation prone. But he is very hit and miss, as it said. He has some good games, and if you actually watch him, he does get a lot of chances, and he has the possibility to put the ball in the back of the net, but Southampton just finished the season so poorly. We don't know how they're going to start. We don't know if the system's going to be the same, whether the manager's going to be the same. There's so many uncertainties, and in comparison to a lot of those other forwards, for example, you can get Iheanacho at 7.5, Watkins at 7.5, Calvert-Lewin at 8, Antonio at 7.5. To pay that extra money on top of Che Adams of just $500,000 is such a better way to spend your money than going for Che Adams at 7. If you want to go Danny Ings, if you want a Southampton player, then 8 million for Ings is a much better way to spend your money. But 7 million for Che Adams, especially given the fact they play Everton, United, and then West Ham and Man City and Wolves all in their first 6. Difficult fixtures for them as well. I don't expect them to start very well. So another player that I would be avoiding in my Game Week 1 team. Next up, another Man City player, and it's Cancelo, who is a 6 million defender, and he was very popular at points last season, 5.07 points per start. But my worry again with a lot of these City players is the minutes that he's going to get. So he is a bit rotation prone with Walker, and we know that Pep has come out and said Zinchenko is now his first choice left back. It's who he played in the Champions League final. Cancelo didn't play in the Champions League final, which has to be a slight worry that he's not in Pep's thinking for his best defensive line. Now we know Pep can do things in certain games like the Champions League final, like big matches, to try and change it up, but it has to be a worry. At 6 million, when you can get a Chelsea defender, or Diaz if I want a City defender, or you know, some of the 5.5 defenders you've got like Shaw, like Luka Dean, I prefer them. And looking at their opening fixtures, although Man City are really good defensively and always will be, Tottenham, Leicester, Chelsea away all in the first 6, isn't exactly what you want. There could be a couple of clean sheets in there for them, but you don't know whether Cancelo is going to play those matches with those difficult games in there. You know, Norwich at home in game week 2 could be an easy chance for Pep to rotate with Tottenham and Arsenal around it. So I think there's better options than Cancelo for your game week 1 team. I just want to remind you all quickly before we move on to the rest of the list that all the stats and everything I do is taken from Fantasy Football Hub. They have a 30% off sale with a link in the description which ends on Saturday, and it will be the biggest discount that you have between now and the start of the season, I think. So I would be getting on that. It's where I get all my stats from. It starts from just £1.40 a month. So if you are interested in that, check the link in the description down below. It's really great, but it ends on Saturday, this big discount. So moving next in my list, we have Patrick Bamford at 8 million. So we won't talk quite so much about him because we spoke a little bit about it when we looked at Dallas. But 5.8 points per start. We know he had a great season, but he did see a significant price rise that the other Leeds attackers didn't really see. So when he's 1.5 million or 2 million more than Rafinha and Harrison, I don't think it's worth paying it for him. They score one more point for a goal. They get an extra point for a clean sheet. Bamford will probably get more attacking returns, but it will start to level out with that big price difference that they are now. And with Rodrigo there, he started to finish the season quite well. We don't know whether Bamford will play alongside him and Rodrigo will play in that sort of attacking midfield role that he did, or will rotate with Bamford, which we saw him getting a lot of early subs at the end of last season. So 8 million is a lot to pay. There are a lot of other good forwards at slightly less than him. The fixtures are okay. Leeds, of course, will create a lot of chances, but I think there are other options I'd prefer if you want a nice forward around that price, or if you want to go for Leeds, there are other players that I'd much prefer. Next up, we have Cresswell in at a defender spot of 5.5 million. Now, this is a controversial one. I'm sure a lot of people will say that he shouldn't be in this list, but I won't be owning Cresswell in my starting team, and I'll give you the reasons why. He had good returns last season being on set pieces, but he will likely be in that centre-back role in a back sort of 5 next season, and Masuaku or someone else will go out to wing back if he's not back fit. He's also more expensive than Soufal, who's now in at 5 million, and they got similar returns with Soufal ending the season really well. And there are also a lot of good defenders in at 5.5. As I mentioned, you know, Tierney in at 5, Reguilon at Tottenham in at 5, and then Shaw, Luca Dean all in at 5.5. And then the start to the season isn't great to them, and they will have Europa League qualifiers to be playing as well. So there is going to be a lot of step-ups for West Ham in this starting part of the season. I don't quite know how they're going to react. There is a chance that Cresswell could be great, but I think I'd want to reduce that risk slightly and go for Soufal if I was going to own a West Ham defender. I think there are other options with better starts to the season than Cresswell. He was very popular last season, so I can see a lot of people wanting to pick him. But for me, I'm not going to be owning Cresswell game week 1. Next on the list, we add Rashford at 9.5 million. So a similar price to what he was last season, but 5 points per start, and he just seems like constantly injured. He has the occasional game where he goes really crazy and gets a lot of returns and looks great, and you think, right, Rashford's back, but it seems so hit and miss. He said to himself at the Euros that he probably needs surgery. He's not been himself recently. 9.5 million, it's just not the Man U asset I would go with, basically. If you want to go for a midfielder who's a bit cheaper, Greenwood in at 7.5, or wait and see if Sancho signs and see what price he is. If not, go up to Bruno Fernandes at 12 million. I really like him at that price up there, but Rashford at 9.5, you could get Son at 10. There are other midfielders or forwards in around that price that I'd much prefer. The opening start to the season for Man U is fine. Leeds, Southampton, Wolves, Newcastle in the first 4, but as I said, that if I want a Man U attacker and I've got budget, then I'd go Bruno Fernandes, and if I had to save some budget, I'd go Greenwood. Rashford just sort of be stuck in that middle price, which if you need to sell him, you don't really have anyone else, you're just downgrading him anyway. So I think Greenwood or Bruno are the players that I'd go for, so there's no chance that I own Rashford. Next up, almost towards the end of the list, we have Raheem Sterling, who's come in at 11. So 5.36 points per start last season. It's just the fact that those City players will likely be rotated. So Mahrez, Foden, Ferran Torres. As I said with Foden, there's likely to be rotation around that, and 11 million is a lot of money to play for Sterling. So yes, he has good points per start, as did Foden. When they start in that Man City team, they score a lot of goals, so it's a great player to have if you can have him starting every week, but we just know that that's not going to happen. I also think that his popularity will be quite high given his performance in the Euros so far with a couple of goals, and I think there'll be a lot of people who maybe just think about their team a little bit and think, oh, okay, Sterling did quite well in the Euros, and his ownership will probably be higher than it should. So if you want to get ahead, I really think Sterling is one that you should avoid. Look at the likes of De Bruyne if you want that, if you see Fernandes, Salah in at that, or go cheaper and go elsewhere for Raheem Sterling. And as we've said, the fixtures are okay. They'll probably score some goals, but there are some difficult defences in there for them to play against. Approaching the end of the list now, the final one we have is all of the 6 million goalkeepers. So actually the 11th one on the list, a little bonus for you all. They returned between 4.1, 4.2 and 4.4 points per start, but the reason for it is they just don't return actually as many points as they're worth. They don't make that many saves. They get clean sheets, yes, but they get 6 points or 2 every week, and you could have a goalkeeper who costs 4.5, which will get you 2 or 2 to 9, 10, like we saw with Martinez last year, with Pope the year before. And their fixtures to start the season are okay. If you wanted one, it would be Alisson. His fixtures are great, but you're much better off paying 6.5 and going Van Dijk, who has goal threat on top of the clean sheets, because these keepers, they just don't make enough saves, which is so important in FPL. For any of you guys who are new or picking your goalkeepers, a 4.5 keeper from a team that are good but make a lot of saves and concede chances is really the best way to find your FPL goalkeeper. It's not all just based on clean sheets. So 6 million is too much to spend on a goalkeeper, and they don't return enough for the price that you're going to pay. So that's actually 11, if not 12, 13 players that I think you should avoid for your Game Week 1 teams. If you've got any questions about players in here, anyone you would include or anyone in here you've actually got in your team at the moment, drop them in the comments down below. I hope you've enjoyed. Please like and subscribe. As always, join the league code, which is just below me. There'll be plenty more videos, 3 videos coming out every single week between now and the start of the season. So I hope you have enjoyed. Good luck with your tinkering. Let's hope the Euros continues in the same way it has, and I will see you all next time.